So good morning, everyone. My name is Ernest. I'm a second-year student here at the university, and I'm studying a Bachelor of Arts in Politics and Pacific Language Studies. And my aim or my passion lies in environmental protection and climate diplomacy, and so that's really something that's important for me, but mainly, in particular, my focus is on Pacific climate diplomacy. And the reason for this is because I think that our environment is something that's particularly integral to our Pacific context and our Pacific culture and our people. At the outset of this presentation, I would like to apologize that my photos will not be as high definition as Wayne's, but I think they will do the job. So I'll just get right into it. Okay, so from my experience as a student using OERs, there are three things that I would like to point out, and every time I say something, my mother says, make sure you have 3 points, because after 3, no one listens. But also, if you have a nice little alliteration, it helps. PPP, pragmatic, propellant, and possibility. So the first one is pragmatic, and so I find that as a student, it's quite handy to have something that's accessible and cost-effective, but also something that's current and relevant to things that I'm studying. And OERs have provided me with that opportunity. The second one is propellant, and the sheer number of resources out there that allow me to then make an opinion and form my own judgment is something that I think is important to my learning, rather than just getting a bunch of information and then reporting that same piece of information back into an examination. And I find that this way OERs have enabled me to engage more exhaustively with a resource. And the third one I've put is possibility. And if you're any student, but particularly someone that does like politics or Pacific studies, you'll find that it's shocking the really low percentage of text or literature about Pacific Island culture and people that is actually written by Pacific Islanders, and that's disappointing. And I find that OERs give an opportunity for our lecturers, our teachers, but also us as students to produce some of that literature for ourselves. And I'll explain these in more detail when I come to those sections. So the first one. I think everyone in this room who has been or is currently a student understands this phenomenon of the broke student life. I don't know what happens, but all of a sudden when you enroll in university, it's like your bank account just decides it's going to turn its back on you. And I remember before entering university, I said to myself, well, that's not going to be me. I'm going to save, and I'm going to be a diligent student, and I'm going to have plenty of money. That didn't happen. I'm halfway through my degree, and I have more courses to my name than I do dollars in my bank account. And the great thing about OERs is they aren't free, but they're far cheaper than a textbook. So this is my second semester of my second year, meaning that I've completed a total of 12 courses. 7 out of those 12 courses required me to buy a textbook. Admittedly, I didn't buy all of them, but I did buy one second-hand textbook out of the 7, and that cost me $130. And if I were to buy all 7, or indeed if I were to say have half of the 24 courses required for my 3-year degree, and bought all of them, that would cost me over $1,000. And for someone who has to count their pennies to just go for lunch, that's difficult. And I find that having resources that are available for me is very good, because at the end of the day, we're an educational institution that's trying to promote learning for people like me and everyone in this room. And I think something that Wayne said is really important, is that learning shouldn't be something that disadvantages certain students just because they can't afford to get a book. I think that's counterintuitive to the purpose of an institution like this. But being pragmatic, there is the cost side of it, but then there is also the idea of having current information that's readily available. If I have to wait for the next version of my textbook to come out, that could be years. In that time, so much is happening. Particularly if you're doing something like politics that relies on things that change every single day, you can't issue a textbook every day. And that's not something that's sustainable, nor would it be a wise thing to do. And the third thing is that news and information and learning tools should always be accessible. So at the moment I do a course called which is PL203, and it's Governance and Development in the Pacific. And our latest assignment was to do something on subnational governments in the Pacific. I won't bore you with the details of that. But to try and find information about Fiji was unbelievably difficult. And there was one resource that was very helpful, and I think if my lecturer were in the room, he'd be sighing, and it was Wikipedia. Because I remember clicking on Google to find, there were 6 or 7 different sites I clicked on, and Google literally, I wrote down what they said, sent me to a web page that said, buy this on discount in paperback or ebook for £37. Sure, I'll just swipe the credit card I don't have and pay for it with the money I don't have. And so, to sum up this point, OERs have given me an opportunity to use resources for my own education that, one, didn't disadvantage me, provided an accessible way for me to learn, but also a way that was cost-effective and current. The second point is, and I think this is really important, and it's this idea of propelling us as students to think not just in the conventional ways that are accepted by everybody. And I look at this idea of quality and quantity. And often these two things are seen as these opposing forces, that you should, if you have quality, you might be giving up quantity. If you have quantity, you might be giving up quality. But I think that actually, from my experience with OERs, they go hand in hand, and they're very useful and complement each other. For example, the sheer number of resources out there means that there's a lot more in terms of points of view and perspective. And if we're allowed to see lots of different perspectives, it gives us the opportunity to then form an opinion. And forming an opinion, I think, is far more important than just remembering A, B, C, and D. And I'll give you an example. So when I was in year 12, at that point I had done about 5 years of history. And we'd done dictators like Joseph Stalin. And I remember in year 12, a parent came to our class and he said, I'd like to just make a point because I read my son's assignment and it was talking about Joseph Stalin, and my issue is I also read your textbook and it's very West biased. And he said, there are lots of things about Stalin that were good that you didn't mention. I'll say now, it didn't change my point of view on what I think of Joseph Stalin, but it gave me the opportunity to then think, well, actually, there is more to this story. Every story that we hear is biased, and we need to make sure that we at least have the opportunity to see all these biases and make a judgment to form our own story. Because I think that's what learning is. And there's a reason that we're here at a learning and teaching forum and not a game of knowledge catch or knowledge pass, because it's not about just throwing knowledge between each other. It's about engaging and really looking at what the reading and the resources are saying and making a judgment for ourselves. And this experience with OERs has enabled me to engage with resources far more exhaustively and develop my own opinion. And I don't know if there are many teachers from SGDIA here, but there are many of them who say that it's so important, I don't care if you remember facts, as long as you're able to take information, form an opinion, and then grow as an individual, and then use that to contribute to society. Now the last point. See what I mean by photos? They weren't particularly great quality. The reason that I told you about the passion that I have at the beginning of this lecture is because I think it's important to what I'm about to say now. As a young Pacific Islander that aims to work in, with, and for the Pacific, it's really important that I then have an idea of what Pacific Islanders have written about our own stories. Because far too often we have been given this, we've been told our stories by people who aren't us. And for me, that doesn't make sense, because, for example, if the American Civil War was told to Americans by a German and said, this is the gospel truth, let's say, hang on, that doesn't seem right. And it's really important that you have people like Sandra Tart, like Robert Nicole, like Claire Slatter, like Wesley Morgan, like Hugh Govan, like Epeli Haofa, like Teresia Te Aiwa, who write Pacific Island stories and ensure that Pacific Islanders like me and everyone else have the opportunity to see what our story is and continue to write that book, continue to tell that story, because that's a part of who we are as individuals. So just to sum up everything that I've said is, one, my experience has been that OERs are a very pragmatic approach to learning. I'm able to do so without being disadvantaged by factors that are out of my control. Two, it's propelled me to think and form my own opinion and engage with readings on a much deeper level. And finally, I've had the choice of different perspectives about the place that I come from. Thank you.
Thanks, Ernest. That was really very good, very interesting. And I particularly like the comment you made about getting multiple perspectives on a given issue and that are up to date when you looked on the internet. And I think that was an issue that was raised by Gillian earlier when she was talking, querying Wayne about how do you deal with this issue of incorrect material out there. And I meant to say at the time, and I forgot to make a comment, that a colleague of mine at Curtin University had a PhD student who did a study of Australian first-year textbooks used in Australian universities, weren't necessarily Australian written. And this is, high-end, extremely expensive textbooks, as Ernest mentioned, that were riddled with errors of scientific fact, not just differences of opinion or limited conversations, but actually wrong scientifically. So the notion that if a student reads a textbook, then they tend not to challenge that. They think the printed word somehow has the highest status in people's mind, whereas it can be just as easily wrong as something on the internet. But I particularly like Ernest's comment there where the fact that simply reading around the topic and getting different perspectives has made you question that and made you think more deeply about what is the right story here, what is the thing here, and those who know quotes better than me will remember who it was who said that the history is written by the victor, and so that is often the case, to take your last point there as well. So thank you very much, it was really very interesting. In the past, in the forum, we used to have staff presentations sort of showcase what people did around the university. After we instituted the Faculty Excellence Awards, Teaching Excellence Awards, we decided to change the approach. And the notion here was that we have these people that have been deemed by their students, their peers, and a panel including international experts to be the best teachers in the faculties. Then we thought, well, that's the story we want to hear. No disrespect to our colleagues and the faculties generally, but these are the people that have been deemed by this process to be our leaders, our thought leaders, and people who their peers and students say are doing really interesting and wonderful things here. And so from last year, we introduced this model where we, rather than having a more open forum around staff saying what they're doing, we get presentations from each of our Teaching Excellence Award winners. So we'll do this in sequence, and then at the end of the three talks, we'll then ask our keynote, Dr. McIntosh, to come and to sort of make some comments and reflection on the issues right across the whole forum, and then I'll finish up with a wrap up on that.